Good night, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time it is wherever you are when you're logging into this event tonight. Time has become sort of meaningless in this pandemic. I think we can all appreciate that. But I can attest that temperature has not become meaningless. 0 degrees Fahrenheit is still bone-chillingly cold. So let's count our blessings where we can, please. Nobody is trudging through the bone-chilling cold tonight to the Gleacher Center in downtown Chicago to be at this event. We are all participating this evening in the comforts of our own home. So hooray for that, yay. Welcome then tonight to what is our 4th virtual version of this Think Better series. I'm delighted tonight to have my good friend, close friend, and close colleague for more than 15 years, Ayelet Fishbach, joining us tonight, along with one of her former PhD students who's now a professor at Kellogg, Rima Toure-Tillery. The goal of this Think Better series is to introduce you to behavioral science, which is the scientific study of human behavior, and to show what behavioral scientists are trying to do to make a meaningful impact in the world. Our goal is also to expose you to the research that we do in behavioral science through seeing some of the experiments that we do through our very own PIMCO decision research labs here at the University of Chicago. Since the pandemic started, we've moved all of our research operations from in-person experiments and study sessions to a virtual format using Zoom-based experiments and interactions. And I think we're the only university that's done this at anywhere near the scale that we've been able to do cooperatively here at the University of Chicago. We now have over 3,000 people enrolled at any one time to participate in our experiments and have run more than 21,000 experimental sessions since we moved online last year. You can participate in any of these experiments if you'd like by going to the Center for Decision Research website and enrolling in our virtual lab. In fact, you've actually already participated in an experiment if you registered for the event this evening, because we conducted an experiment around the registration event to see what might affect turnout rates at tonight's event. This experiment was conducted by Eugene Winnett, one of our PhD students, and Jane Risen, one of our faculty at Booth, for both in the CDR, and you'll be getting a follow-up email explaining what questions we were asking in that experiment and what we think we may have learned from it. Now, in thinking through who we should have speak this evening, we thought hard about the most pressing questions we want answers to during this pandemic. For instance, how do I button these shirts? Can you even remember? How do I find where my dress shoes went? I'm not so sure. How do I stay motivated to get important things done these days? I'm afraid the first 2 questions are beyond the scope of our faculty expertise, but the last one is not. Ayelet Fishbach, tonight, one of our speaker, is one of the world's leading experts in how to get things done, how to stay on task, and how to motivate yourself when motivation can be hard to come by. She also happens to be one of the most amazing people I've seen in motivating and encouraging our own PhD students and postdocs to do great things. She's one of our field's greatest mentors. And you can see that by the long list of her great students who are all employed gainfully out in the world, spreading our research to universities all around the world. And as a testament to that strength, Ayelet is being joined tonight by one of her great former students, Rima Toure-Tillery, who's now on the faculty at Kellogg. Ayelet has just finished writing her first book describing her more than 2 decades of award-winning research on motivation. The tentative title of her book is Get It Done, although she told me earlier today that she's not sure that they actually got that title done and that it may still change. So whatever the title is, keep an eye out for a book coming out soon with her name on it. It's going to be well worth reading. We don't have to wait tonight, though, for that book to come out because she's going to give a preview of that research and the contents of that book this evening. The way this is going to work is she's going to speak for about 30 minutes on some of her research, and then Rima is going to walk us through a series of questions that we selected from the massive number that you submitted when you registered for the event tonight. Ayelet and Rima, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm delighted that you're here. Now, Ayelet, tell us how to stay motivated, please.
Thank you, Nick. It's great to see you, and I'm delighted to be here to spend this time with the Booth community and hear Ayelet talk about motivation. So I met Ayelet when I joined Booth as a doctoral student in 2008, and she became my dissertation advisor, as Nick pointed out, And now she can't get rid of me. Ayelet has been an amazing role model, one of the most driven people I know, but also one of the most motivating people I know. And she does it all with a sort of laid back, chill attitude. So to many of us grad students at the time, she was like some sort of superhero. And she doesn't know this, but we would often talk about her behind her back, about everything she seemed to be juggling, family life, professional life, too many grad students. And those conversations always ended with someone shrugging and saying, I don't know how she does it all. So tonight we're going to find out. We've received hundreds of questions from the audience about motivation in general, but also specific questions about motivation in these stressful times. And there's no better person to turn to on this topic than Ayelet Fishbach. So we're going to jump right into it and ask the burning question. Ayelet, how do you stay motivated?
Thank you, Rima. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you, Nick, for introduction, and thanks everyone who joined us. And boy, how do I stay motivated? Well, I'm a mom. I have a child that is remote learning, like you, Rima. You have two that are remote learning. So that's not easy. We are remote teaching, we are remote working, we are remote everything, and it's hard. I think the one thing that I do is look forward to something every day. Today I was looking forward to spending this hour with you, finding these things that are still happening in my life and are fun and rewarding. What do you do? How do you stay motivated?
So finding things that bring you joy. So for me, these days, it's really all about taking it one day at a time, because we just don't know what's going to happen from day to day. Whether the kids are going to go to school or stay at home, whether we'll be able to get the car out of the snow tomorrow. So I try to stay in the present and enjoy my family and all the good people in my life. So it's a pleasure to be here. This is one of those fun moments as well.
Great. So shall we ask people what they are struggling with? What do you say?
Yeah, let's start the poll. So it'd be great if the audience took a few seconds to complete the poll. I think everyone is seeing this now. What are some of the things you're struggling to motivate yourself to do these days?
This is my list of everything I would personally struggle with. I'm curious to know what people are most relate to.
Yeah, I was going to start checking off, but I can't. But yes, everything here seems like something I would also select. So yeah, it would be fun to see. It'd be interesting to see what everyone else is thinking.
What do you say? Shall we take a look or give people a few more seconds?
As soon as we can see the results,
Oh, I see. It's beyond your hands.
Yeah. So I think everyone should be able to see these results. It looks like exercising is a big one, completing work tasks, planning for the future and maintaining relationships with friends, which is, I imagine, is hard to do these days, in these days of social distancing. What do you think? Is anything surprising here?
I'm not very surprised that exercise came first, and I'm afraid that my intuition was correct, that we have no losers. All of these things are are marked by many people, the things that they are struggling with. So big ones are completing work tasks, exercising, and planning the future, but also maintaining relationships is hard, and even just get out of bed in the morning. So let's talk about how to do this.
Yeah, we can't wait to hear you tell us about motivation, Ayelet.
Okay, so let me share my slides here and we'll jump into it, and I will talk for a while and then get some questions from you, Rima. So this is a picture of Rima and me back in the days when she was a graduate student at Chicago Booth. We studied motivation. I'm going to tell you a bit of what we found and what I found with other amazing co-authors and students. But let me start with a story that I heard as a child, and it's a story about this guy. It's the Baron Munchausen, and this Munchausen guy, he was riding his horse when he accidentally found himself in a large swamp. As the horse sinks into the bog, the Baron basically freaking out, but not losing his senses. He came up with a peculiar solution. He was grabbing himself and the horse by his pigtail. So he's basically like lifting himself and the horse that is sitting on using his pigtail. This is of course, physically impossible. You can't pull yourself by your hair, but psychologically you can, and you probably do it every day. You may have pulled yourself out of bed in the morning. I think that about a quarter of the audience said that they do that. And maybe you pull yourself out of a conflict with a colleague or a family member. Maybe you pull yourself out of a party after you had one drink too many. We constantly pull ourselves, we motivated ourselves. And what we do is basically apply the principles that we would use when we motivate others on ourselves. And as a motivation scientist, when I ask how people motivate themselves, I basically look at how they motivate others and what we found works, and think about how can we apply this to ourselves. And I think both about what people do and what people could do using insights from motivation in general, from how we motivate others. And there are 4 elements for the process of motivating someone, including oneself. The first is setting a goal. Okay, so we need to start somewhere. We decide where do we want to go. We mark a destination. The second is sustaining the motivation. So getting from here to there, looking for feedback, monitoring the progress. The third is addressing multiple goals, everything else that goes on in our life. And the fourth element is designing social support. That is designing the environment that will help me achieve the goals that I set for myself. So what I'm going to do today is give you some research insights, some tips that relate to either of these 4. And let's start with setting a goal. Let's start at the beginning. Here's a very powerful goal, getting to the top of Mount Everest. People are actually willing to pay with their lives in order to reach this goal. And you can see here a line of people that are waiting to get to the top of the Everest. And why is this such a powerful goal? Well, for one thing, it is very specific. You want to know, you want to get to the peak of the mountain, and you know when you are there. Further, this is a goal that is not a means, it's not something that gets you to another goal, it's the goal itself. Okay, you are not climbing Mount Everest because you want to then reach another mountain. You do it in order to do it. Third, this is a very rewarding goal. If you live to tell the tale, then many people will admire you for this amazing achievement. And fourth, you know what? You don't really care about these incentives. You want to climb Mount Everest for the sake of making it to the top. It's in an intrinsic goal. And I will start there. Okay, when we set goals, we want to set goals, not chores. We want the goal to be intrinsic. We want pursuing the goal to be something that we experience as an end in itself. Now, this might not sound natural for many, because usually when we set a goal, it's because we are trying to get ourselves to do something that we wouldn't do otherwise. Okay? We set a New Year resolution because we want to do something that we were not doing last year. But what we find is that to the extent that pursuing the resolution feels like an end in itself, then people are going to stick with it. Okay, a few months later, they will still be pursuing this resolution. We find the same thing when we look at students studying in the library or people exercising in the gym. How much time they would spend studying or exercising depends on how much they experience the activity as an end in itself. They find the teaching, the studying materials interesting. They find exercising joyful. We find it with consumption of healthy food. To the extent that people like the food, they enjoy consuming it, they will eat it. We also find that by making activities more intrinsically motivated, people are able to stick longer with them. By making studying more fun, for example, by introducing music, snacks, colors, pencils, and so on, people were able to stick longer with math problems. Okay? Making something more intrinsic, more as an end by itself, means that you can do it for a longer period of time. There are two mispredictions that prevent us from fully utilize the power of intrinsic motivation. One is our belief that intrinsic motivation matters for us now more than in the future, or more than we remember it mattering for us in the past. So, for example, employees tend to report that something like learning new things or feeling good at work, feeling good with the people that they work with, is critical for them right now. Okay, it's as important as the amount of pay or job security for their current job. But when applying for a job, they don't anticipate that they will care about these intrinsic incentives so much. Okay, so they may apply for a job thinking mainly about salary and less about learning new things and developing. We also tend to think that other people care less about intrinsic motivation than we do. Okay, we tend to think that while we care about learning new things and getting along with people at work, others care about it less. And that means that as managers, we often don't quite understand the motivation of our employees. Okay, so we want goals that are intrinsically motivating. We also want to set our goals as a goal and not as the way to get there, not as a means. Okay, we don't like to invest in means. We like to climb Mount Everest. We don't like to practice. Okay, so we better set the goal as getting to the top of the mountain. We actually found it in one study that I like, in which we ran an auction with our MBA students for Richard Thaler's book, Misbehaving, our own Richard Thaler. The book was signed. Richard since then got the Nobel Prize, so I bet the bidding prices would be higher now, but back then, our students were willing on average to pay $23 for the book. But when we asked them to place bids on a fancy tote bag that contained the book, their bidding prices went down to $12 on average. Okay, people were willing to pay less for a bag that contains a book than for the book itself. This may sound weird, but people don't like to pay for means. We don't like to pay for shipping. We don't like to pay for parking. And in this case, people didn't like to pay for the tote bag. In economic terms, by the way, that means that the value of the tote bag was minus, negative $12, $11, which is kind of funny to think about. Set goals, not means. Set do goals, set approach goals. Avoidance goals are very hard to pursue. This is a classic example from Dan Wegner's study when he asked people not to think about white bear. Try not to think about white bear. I bet everybody is now thinking about a white bear. Try not to think about your ex. I bet everybody is thinking about their ex. It's really hard not to do something. It's much easier to do something else. So think about brown bear. That's everybody can do. Think about your current romantic partner. That's much easier than trying not to think about someone else. Set challenging goals, try to challenge yourself. I present here the example of marathon runners. This is a study by my colleagues, Devin Pop and George Wu and more. They were looking at the times people finish the marathon across 10 million marathon runners. And as you can see, these runners like to challenge themselves. They tend to finish the marathon just before some rounded time, okay, just before 4 hours. Many more people finish under 4 hours than over 4 hours, okay, or under 4.5 than 4:31. Basically, people are challenging themselves and it works. They run faster. Use incentives, incentivize yourself and use smart incentives. And let me give you a few examples of dumb incentives, or why incentives are sometimes not smart. This is what you're looking at now is the classic example from the historical Hanoi Rat Massacre. It's an event that happened at the beginning of the 20th century when French colonials wanted to fight the rat problem in Hanoi, and they created this bounty program where they would pay 1 cent for each rat that is being killed. Well, if you're being paid to bring dead rats, what you do is basically creating first live rats. And indeed, the supposed hunters were farming rats so that they could kill them and claim the bounty. In economics, this is called the cobra effect, named after a similar failed program to eliminate cobras in India. So set smarter incentives than this. In one of the studies that we ran a few years ago, we looked at what happens when you tell children that food is good for them, that it will make them strong, or that it will make them smart. Or what you see in this example, in the story here, is what happens when you tell them about a child that ate baby carrots and it helped her count to 100. Okay, what these 3 to 5-year-old kids do is not eat carrots. Basically, they don't think that carrots taste very well if the main reason to eat them is in order to learn how to count. So set fewer incentives that don't distract you from the purpose of pursuing the goal. Go for uncertain incentives. Not knowing whether your efforts will pay off can be exciting, can feel like a game, can feel like a challenge. So don't stay away from uncertain incentives. Try your talent or your luck, see where it gets you. Let's move to sustaining motivation. How do we get from here to there? The general rule is that with progress, there is more motivation. For example, most kids in the US that start college, not most, but about half of the kids that start college don't graduate. Okay, there are many people that drop out, but most of those who drop out at the beginning. It is much easier to give up on the goal of getting an academic degree after your first year than after your third year. Same thing for loyalty programs. Most people that start a loyalty program will not claim the benefits. They will give up, but they will mainly give up at the beginning. After you made some progress, you are likely to stick with the program. Why? Well, when we do something, we become more committed. So now after 1 year of studying for college, you feel more committed toward achieving this goal. Also, the contribution of each additional step appears larger. So, for example, your first year in college gets you 25% of a college degree. After you completed 3 years, your last year in college will get you 100% of a college degree. You basically get more for your buck, and hence motivation increases. Okay, so progress generally increases motivation, but generally so. There are predictable situations in which feeling that you have made progress may make you feel that you have done enough and actually decrease motivation. You might feel depleted, you might feel licensed, Some people take the escalator to get to the gym. If you think about it, that doesn't make a lot of sense. However, if you think about it further, anytime that you use the escalator or the elevator, you are basically skipping an opportunity to get some stairs, which is good for you, which is something that you would do otherwise when you exercise. And so the idea that we can give ourselves some slack, well, that's often coming out of feeling that we made enough progress, and we should be careful about this balancing between working and letting go if it means that we don't get our exercise. My research mainly looked at when is it best to monitor our progress in terms of what we have completed versus what is still left for us to complete. Whether we should look at the glass half full or quarter full, or the glass half empty or quarter empty. And what we find is that attention to progress beginning, to completed progress at the beginning is beneficial. When we just start on a goal, when we feel that this is new for us, that we are novices, that we are not sure that we are committed, looking back and saying, oh, I have done that much is useful. Okay, help sustain the motivation. However, toward the end of pursuing a goal, when we feel that we are experts, or if we are highly committed to whatever we are doing, then it makes sense to look at what we have not done yet, to look at lack of progress and be motivated, but what still needs to be accomplished. The way we monitoring our goal, whether we look forward at what we have not done versus look back at what we have done, also affects our level of aspiration. Basically, we find that people that describe their work in terms of what they have not done yet are those who would like to move up the ladder. Okay, if I ask you about your job, about what you are doing, and you tell me about everything that you plan to do, I know that you have a high level of aspiration. Although interestingly, those that tend to describe what they've already accomplished tend to be more satisfied with their current role. That leads me to the research with Rima, where we said, well, if beginnings are motivating, if you're gaining commitment from just starting to work on a problem, and if ends are motivating because you're almost there and with just a little bit more progress, you will get there, what happens in the middle? And middles are problematic. Okay, this is my warning sign here. There is fragile motivation. We should handle it with care when we are in the middle. And Rima showed it in an amazing line of studies in a paper that I'm very proud of. I'm presenting one result here. We follow Jewish participants over the 8 nights of Hanukkah. If you're not familiar with the custom, as an observant Jewish person, you're supposed to light the menorah for 8 days, 8 consecutive days. Almost everybody in our sample did it on the first day. The majority of the people did it on the last day. But in the beginning, they were not so much careful to follow the tradition. Their motivation was lower. Our advice is to keep the middle short. An annual exercising goal is not good. You should probably want to make it weekly. Okay, a decade saving goals is also not very efficient, and so we want to think about our savings over the month or the year. The other problem with sustaining motivation is that we need to learn from feedback. We need to collect feedback. And I say a problem because positive feedback is easy to accept, is easy to learn from. Negative feedback, not so much. Serena Williams, quoted here, famously said, I've grown most not from victories, but setbacks. If winning is God's reward, then losing is how he teaches us. She's not the only one. Many famous, important people have lectured to us that we need to learn from negative feedback. I suspect that they emphasize that because we don't incline to do so. Okay, it's why I tell my son to wash his hands. He's just not going to do that unless I tell him to wash his hands. If you're unconvinced, then let me show you some data. Here's an experiment in which we asked people some questions. We gave them 2 answers. They had to guess, and then they were tested on what they learned. Okay, so you can ask yourself, what is this symbol in Hindi? And if you don't know Hindi, then I can tell you it's either a foot or a hand, and you make your guess. And if you guessed foot, well, this is incorrect. By now you should know it's a hand. If you guess a hand, I'm telling you that's correct. And by now you know that you're right. Or I can ask you which couple is real here, the one, the upper one or the lower. And again, like, you make your guess. And if I say that you were wrong, then you should know the answer just as much as if I say that you were right, because if it's not A, then it's B. And no, if it's not B, then it's A. Nevertheless, when we run these studies, we find that when we give people success feedback, they learn. They get about 80% of the questions correct on the next testing phase. If we give people failure feedback, they learn very, very little. They have 50% chance of just guessing the answer. And across all the studies that we have run, they are barely at 59%. So it's really hard to learn from failure. How do you do this? Well, develop or recall your commitment and expertise, develop a growth mindset, understand that negative feedback is for you to learn from. Observe others' failures. It's often easy to learn when someone else fails. It doesn't sting me. And give advice to another person. After you fail, try to think about the advice that you would give another person based on your failure. Okay, we are now with multiple goals. How to address all these other things that might stand in the way of achieving the goal that I set for myself? Well, the philosopher's advice, the existentialist advice, is to just will one thing, just want one thing, and then you don't have a problem. The psychologist will tell you that this is impossible. And so you should go for the less inspiring but more realistic advice. Pick your battle. Okay, decide which goal you are going to focus on, because at any moment you are going to try to achieve several goals, and they might conflict with each other. When we look at people's goal systems, the collection of goals that people wish to achieve, we are basically focusing on 2 basic structures. One is these structures on the left, the equifinal structure. Here we have different activities that all lead to the same goal, different means to a goal. You can think about this as all roads lead to Rome. So, for example, I'm going to be hungry soon. I can either use a takeout, or I can cook myself dinner, or I can look at the fridge and just eat whatever I find there. We can also think about that structure on the right, the multifinal structure, where the same activity gets you several goals simultaneously. This also captured by the less famous idiom, feed 2 birds with 1 stone. The idea here is, for example, that by cooking myself a meal, I will satisfy my hunger. Maybe I will also save money. Maybe I will also eat more healthily. Okay, so several goals have been achieved. Why this matters at all? Equifinal means increased confidence, which means that if you can think of several activities that you can take toward achieving a goal, you are going to feel more motivated. You know that you have plan A and plan B and plan C, and you can get there somehow. Multifinal means lead to maximize attainment. Okay, by pursuing the same activity, a single activity, you can achieve more goals, and therefore they are desirable. And so we want to develop these too. Many times a goal conflict is actually a self-control conflict, and a self-control conflict is when there is something you should be doing and something you shouldn't be doing. It's an ancient problem. Here I have a picture of Lot's wife, or actually what she turned into once she was too tempted to look back, despite God's angels telling her that she should not do this. As we learn from not thinking about white bears, not doing something is very hard. Just by the fact that you were told not to do it, you want to do it. In modern life, self-control, being able to focus on goals and avoid temptation, has been shown to enable academic success, success at work, financial savings, and relationship maintenance. It is also part of our everyday culture. We always talk about self-control. I recently saw this post, which I thought was funny. I don't mean to brag, but I finished my 14-day diet in 3 hours and 12 minutes. Self-control is always on our mind. Self-control requires that we will first see a conflict and then do something about it. And I say that we should first identify a conflict, because many self-control conflicts are not quite apparent. Okay, leaving a mess in the house just one time will not destroy my relationship. Okay, what might be problematic is that if I always do this. Okay, only once you recognize that there is a problem, then we should expect that you will try to do something about it and resolve the conflict. Here's an example for why identifying a conflict can be difficult. This is in the domain of ethical behavior. We ask people, and you can ask yourself, whether you would sometimes call in sick when you're actually just tired, or whether you would bluff in a negotiation with a potential employer about current salary. You can ask yourself whether you falsely agree to perform work tasks without the intention of doing so, or whether you sometimes take office supply from home, for personal use. This is my personal offense back in the days when I used to go to the office. Or you can ask yourself all these questions together. And what we find is that when we ask people one question at a time, they say yes. When we ask all the questions together, people say no. In a way, once you see the entire array of slightly unethical behaviors that you could be pursuing, then you say, well, I'm not that kind of a person. Beyond ethics, identifying temptations, whether it's in a personal relationship, in saving, in healthy eating, is easier when you think about multiple decisions together, when you don't assume that everyone does it, when you assume that you are going to be consistent, that your decision to eat this extra donut today is also going to translate to a similar decision tomorrow, and when you assume that your actions convey who you are as a person. As for battling temptations, what we find is that you have a much better chance in resisting the temptation, in counteracting the temptation, if you anticipate it in advance. If you know that the party is going to have lots of alcohol, you can prepare in advance, and that will help you to limit how much you're going to drink. If alcohol is presented without you anticipating it, it is much harder to resist. We are at the last part, at designing social support, and let me say here that I think that every important goal that we ever pursue is something that we do with other people. Okay, it could be starting a family, it could be starting a company. If it's important, then others are involved. And others either walk with us. Okay, this is the example of a group that's pulling the rope together. We walk with others. Others also inspire us. We walk in the presence of others. When others walk with us, we want to avoid social loafing or free riding. We want everybody to help the group. When we are looking to be inspired by others, we want to find the right role models, the people that will inspire us. So one tip about working with others, if you feel less committed, look at what others are already doing that will increase your commitment. Look back at the half full, okay, at what others already contributed. If you're committed to the goal, if the goal is important for you, then look at what others have not been doing yet. Okay, look at the glass half empty. As for role models, how to get people to support you just by being around you, by inspiring you, identify your role models. Your role models are usually the people that you value their opinions and that expect you to do well. So they are not necessarily the people that are doing something as much as the people that expect you to do something, and that you believe that you can do it because of their expectations. We actually often follow others' views much more than others' actions. Okay, we tend to eat what others say is their favorite food more than what they eat. Okay? We follow on YouTube others' likes more than number of views. We follow in online shopping others' ratings more than sales information. We follow others' views and attitudes and goals for us, and so we want our role models to be those who expect us to be successful. So that is where I end, and let me just summarize before I bring the conversation back to Rima, that to get things done, you should start by setting a goal, make it a goal, not a chore, not a means. Few and uncertain incentives will help. Then sustain your motivation by monitoring what you have achieved at the beginning and what you still need to do after the midpoint. Learn from feedback, also negative. Address the multiple goals that you have. Think about alternative means, activities that will help you pursue your goals. And also on all the goals that you can achieve by pursuing one activity or means. Support your self-control. And finally, design social support. Do it with others, with support from others, and using role models. And speaking of social support, the research that I shared with you today and the insights that I derived from it about self-motivation, I did none of this just by myself. I worked with many collaborators. Let me mention some that their results I shared with you today. These will be Lauren Chris Winkler, Michal Maimaran, Mingjang Ku, Franklin Shaddy, Oliver Sheldon, our Rima Toure-Tillery, of course, Yan Ping Tu, and Caitlin Woolley. And with this, back to you, Rima.
All right, that was great. And you know, we have a lot of questions. So we've tried to organize them by themes. A lot of questions, some of the questions have been answered already by your presentation, but let's start with goal setting. We have several questions about goal setting. And one of them is, we live in a world where we're trying to avoid a lot of things. You say, you know, don't set goals, but there's so many things that we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid sugar, fats, screens, germs. So how do we reframe these avoidance goals? And you know, is it sometimes useful to have avoidance goals?
Yeah, great question. So I would say that you referred to two goals. One is avoiding sickness, and another one was eating healthily. And eating healthily is very easy to switch the mindset into eating healthily instead of do not eat unhealthy food. Okay, so instead of thinking about everything that you should not eat, think about everything that will be good for you to eat, that you will approach. Diseases, that's an interesting example because avoidance goals are sometimes good, and with avoiding diseases, that's actually when it is often beneficial to think about avoiding germs, and there's just a fit between the goal and the way that you pursue it.
So if there's a fit between the goal and how it needs to be pursued, then that's a good type of goal to set, an avoidance goal.
Absolutely. The other reason to set an avoidance goal is if you think that there is some urgency, they seem more urgent.
I see. Okay. Well, we have another question about setting goals. One is, should I set reach goals or attainable goals? You talked about setting challenging goals, but how challenging should it be?
Challenging, reach goals. Okay. I would say something that you have about 80% chance to be successful, to be able to achieve it. So
that's great. That's great to know. Here's another one. So how to overcome FOMO, fear of missing out, when you're setting a goal. So I guess this means, how do you limit the number of goals that you want to set for yourself?
Avoid social media, Rima. I think that, if I don't follow social media, then FOMO is much less affecting me. We always want to do more than we do. And I bet that when I look at you and I say, Rima, you are so successful, then you're probably thinking, but there are all these things that I plan to do and I didn't get a chance. Yeah, like that. It's better to err on wanting too much than wanting too little, I would say.
Okay, so avoid social media. Is that an avoidance goal?
I think that you just caught me. Approach everything else.
Approach other things than social media. But we have another really interesting question. This is one about, what if you don't have any goals, but you kind of have a general idea of where you want to be? In a sense, that sounds like a goal, but what happens if you don't set goals? Must we set goals all the time?
No, we don't need to set goals all the time, but there are certain things that we want to achieve, and there are certain places where we want to get to. And there are many things in life that just require long-term planning, and so unless you set the goal, then it just hard to do that. So I mean, I don't know if that's a great answer, but I would say, to this person, that you probably have goals and it might make sense to verbalize them to yourself.
So actually setting those goals, saying this is my goal, and identifying them would be a good place to start. One that's really relevant for the time period that we're in: are New Year's resolutions worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. They're also about, like, they will most likely fail.
Why is that?
Yeah, but that's fine. Well, because we have these like extremely aspirational goals, right? That by January 1st, we think that this year we will be completely different. We're not going to be completely different, but at least we try. Okay? And Caitlin, Wally, and I found that by March, people still pursue some of these resolutions.
So the problem with New Year's Eve goals, New Year's resolution, seems to be that they're unrealistic.
Yeah, but that's fine. Like I would say that if it works for you, then be unrealistic. You might not get to where you were planning to get, but you will do something, right? Like if you eat healthier food because you want to eat only healthy food, well, no one that I know eats only healthy food, but we might eat healthier than we would have otherwise. So
that makes sense. Yeah. Something's better than nothing.
Exactly.
So another category of question is about sustaining motivation, which is the second thing you talked about. Once you set a goal and get started, you have to find a way to keep going. So we have some questions about this. So one is that many goals feel like chores, especially the ones for which we're not intrinsically motivated. Like, so for some people like me, working out. So how can we reframe going on the treadmill to not feel like a chore, to feel like something fun?
So our next speaker, Katie Milkman, would suggest, and I agree, that you should find something fun to do that you only do when you're on a treadmill. Okay, so your favorite Netflix show that you only watch when you're on the treadmill. I would also say that maybe the treadmill is not the right thing for you, that exercising needs to be fun. And so we can make it fun, bringing this external stimuli to it. We might also pursuing the wrong exercising activity. We might need to explore. If it's not fun, we're not going to stick to it.
So that kind of goes back to your equifinal means. So finding another way to get to the goal rather than one that you're not enjoying. Is that real? Okay. So this next question is about the pandemic specifically. I mean, these are really stressful times. So this is the question. The audience member says, why is it hard to stay motivated during the pandemic? And what do you recommend for people who are going to be working from home for a really long time?
Yeah, well, it's hard for different reasons. I mean, for various reasons, actually. It's hard because we don't have our social support. So like the fourth ingredient is largely missing. We are used to work with colleagues in a certain environment, and now they are not there, and you may be sitting by yourself, or maybe you are sitting with people that are not supporting your work motivation, like your lovely children, Rima. Right, so that's hard. It's also hard because we worry. We spend a long time just worrying and following what's going on, and this is very distracting. Saying that, I hope that by now for many people there is a better routine for working from home. I hear that many people are thinking about ways to use some of the lessons that we learned during the pandemic when we go back to the office, how to maybe also arrange life in a different way so that we do work from home. And I don't know if I answered your question, but I could at least I could explain why it's hard. If the question was what to do, well, there's a lot, right?
So then this is one of those things where you just basically understand it's going to be hard, and sort of living with that, the knowledge that it's hard and it's not something that most people find easy to do.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for everyone. It's going to be hard, but like that's okay. If it's hard, then we just do our best and forgive ourselves when we don't meet our standards.
That's great. So this is also related to the pandemic, and it's moving to the next thing that you talked about, which was rewards, which is a big part of motivation, rewarding yourself, incentivizing other people. And so in talking to people during the pandemic, a lot of people that I talk to say that they are taking it one day at a time, and which was my answer to your question also, one step at a time, not looking too far ahead. Is that beneficial or detrimental to motivation? How important is it to keep your eyes on the prize to make progress on your goals?
So it's interesting because the motivation scientists don't quite agree on this one. Some people say that really the trick is to be very abstract and always think about like your most abstract goals, like why are you doing this? And others suggest that no, we should focus on the how and like the day by day, like what do you do? So basically, you can find an argument for one or the other. Then there is some research that I think that I personally agree with that suggests that when you encounter obstacles, it's beneficial to go down, and to focus on the more concrete day-to-day task that you do. So when life is good, when you feel successful, think abstractly, think about where do you want to take your life. And when you encounter an obstacle, then think concretely, what am I doing today? How am I going to work on this step by step?
Okay, so in a time of crisis like this, it seems that people at least are having the right intuition of taking it one day at a time and focusing on each step rather than looking too far ahead. Another question related to this is whether you talked about uncertain incentives when you're trying to motivate yourself, and how having uncertainty in your incentives or your rewards can help. So can you give us some tips on how to set uncertain incentives for ourselves? When I know that I'm tricking myself if I'm setting these uncertain incentives for myself?
It's interesting. I mostly think about getting into a system. So basically allowing yourself to subscribe to a system that gives you incentives that are uncertain. So when you start a project at work, like how risk-seeking are you? Okay, are you going to work on a problem that's very similar to the problem that you worked on before, so you absolutely know that you can solve it? Okay, is your next paper going to be very similar to your previous paper, so you know exactly what you're doing, or you're going to move away and do something more risky, and who knows, it might end up with like nothing. So it's more I understand that when you are not sure whether you will be successful, you're actually going to work harder. You're also going to be more scared, frankly, but you will work harder.
I see. Okay. So it's more putting yourself in the situation rather than tricking yourself with some uncertain incentives. That makes sense. So I want to have time to get over some of these questions about social support. We got a lot of questions about that. Social support or the lack thereof. So one question was, how can we seek and get social support in the age of social distancing? And does remote social support work the same way as in-person physical social support?
I wish it worked the same. I really miss seeing people and like being with them and hug my friends and my extended family. But it's much better than nothing, right? So like we do have modern technology on our side. We can do this, Rima. We can meet.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is great. I think my fear is that some people might not realize how important social support is. So thinking that I can just be locked down in my home office and produce high quality work, well, you need to talk to colleagues. You need to talk to people. You need to do things with family members. You need a social connection, and so don't give up on it just because it's harder.
Okay, so your advice is just seek it out, even if it's remote. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, go meet people in 0 degrees, like in cold, just so that you see someone.
Go make some snow angels. So related to this, and you said go to the office, and this is all assuming, if that you have a good relationship with your colleagues and your boss. One of the questions we got was about how to stay motivated in a negative environment with an abusive boss or an environment that is not as supportive as one might like.
Gosh, I'd say that if your boss is abusive, just run away. But I also realize that this is easier said than done. Plan a different job. Okay, I think about where you are taking your life so that you don't work with that person. Spend your time getting into more productive relationship, whether it's at work or in your personal life. There are certain relationships that you need to get out of, and that could be a goal to start a new job or a new relationship.
So getting yourself out of that situation and finding a more supportive environment.
Yeah. Realize that you're not going to do well in an unsupportive environment, and you need to change that.
That makes a lot of sense. So it looks like we're really getting close to the hour. One last question. We've learned so much about motivation tonight. And as one of the foremost experts on the topic, you've written a lot of articles, more than 100 articles. And Nick just hinted at a book, an upcoming book. Can you tell us more? When can we expect to see this book on the shelves?
Thank you. Rima, the book was accepted for publication about a month ago, and so now it's not in my hands anymore. It's been an amazing experience to write it. You'll see your name all over it, Rima. And I would think that probably sometimes this year.
That's great. I can't wait to read it.
I hope you will. All right. So here's Nick, he's back. So I think we are giving the stage to you.
We are done. Thanks so much, Ayelet and Rima. This was really great. Don't hold your breath waiting for Ayelet's book to come out. It will come out whether you hold it or not. You don't have to motivate yourself for it to come out. You just pick it up when you see it. It'll definitely be worth a read for sure. And I also hope that we see you again soon. We have one more installment of our Think Better series yet for this academic year, which is May 20th yet this academic year with Katie Milkman from Wharton. So don't rely on your limited motivation to come to that event. Put it in your calendar now, May 20th, 2021. I will hope to see you there. That concludes the event for tonight. Thanks again, Ayelet and Rima. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Nick.